Yes.
Okay, cool. Then I can go into introductions and then I will start. So my name is Jane Kelly. I'm the first government speaker for Berkeley. And this is my
My name
partner.
is Shiloh Wall. I'm the second government speaker for Berkeley.
And okay, so I guess that's good. Okay, so I have 7 minutes and my time will start now. Okay, so just to go over the motion really quickly, this House regrets the memorialization of Pablo Escobar in popular culture. Just quickly for some definitions and top of case, we say that memorialization generally refers to the process of preserving memories of people or events. It can be a form of address or petition or a ceremony of remembrance or commemoration. So we say that in this round, memorialization, as with like in general in real life, memorialization does carry a positive connotation. We say that memorialization is different than, telling history. It is specifically remembering them in at least some sort of positive way. We're weighing this round on net benefits to society, basically what's best for society, the good minus the bad for society. And we define this house as a national government, like in the world. We say that defining this house as a rational individual is unreliable because we're the ones, or a rational individual is the ones consuming and especially creating popular culture. So we say that this is why we're defining this as a national government. And just for some background, Pablo Escobar was a Colombian drug lord involved in international cocaine trade. Some of his crimes included drug trafficking, kidnapping, and bribes to governments. Okay, on to our first contention. We say that the memorialization of Pablo Escobar glorifies criminals. We say that Pablo Escobar has been featured in video games, movies, and magazines, and not necessarily always in an accurate or negative light. We say that often he is, as the motion says, memorialized and glorified. We say that by glorifying criminals, you're ignoring the deaths of many of his victims and also how people are affected by drugs throughout the world. We say that this not only applies to his crimes specifically, but because he was involved in international drug trade, that his impacts on people, his negative impacts, have been felt all throughout the world, even years after he was killed. We also say that if criminals are painted in a good light by popular culture can be very skewed and very misleading and not offer the full context of like the story. So we say that people will encourage these things without actually knowing that it will harm them specifically and harm them badly and harm other people. We say that again, the context can be skewed, and so they may be advocating or glorifying these things that are actually going to hurt them right back. And the impacts of all of these things, of glorifying criminals in general, is just one, again, less empathy towards victims and general sort of inequality towards victims. And this is bad for society because you're hurting people, and glorifying criminals in general, it never turns out well. You're going to keep hurting people. And if we're talking about net benefits to society, we want less and less criminals and we want less and less people advocating for and glorifying criminals. So again, this is good for society. In our second contention, we say that by memorializing Pablo Escobar, you are glorifying and memorializing drugs in general. We say that a national government in this motion would never want people to associate drugs with being memorialized or glorified. We're not saying that like drug addicts shouldn't be cared for. We're saying in general, the idea of taking drugs like recreationally should not be encouraged because it is incredibly dangerous. And also, if drugs are seen as a good thing, the victims of drugs, drug addicts who are struggling, will also not be sort of cared for in as serious of a way because it's not seen as terrible of a thing and there's no real way to help them. So the impacts of this are if people are glorifying drugs more, then obviously there's more death, more drug addicts, and this is bad for society because one, we don't want people dying and we don't want drug addicts, and we want people who are drug addicts to be helped instead of just sort of being pushed aside because drugs are not seen as terrible of a thing. And in our third contention, we say that national governments obviously want to maintain power. Pablo Escobar went against the Colombian government, and also the US government did not like him. So we say that he serves as a symbol of resistance towards governments. And if you're a national government, you obviously don't want this. You want your citizens to like you and you want to maintain power. So we say that, again, if governments want power, they don't want someone to inspire fighting back because of the memorialization, especially because in popular culture, context can be significantly left out. So the impacts of this, of not memorializing Pablo Escobar, especially for national governments. It lowers the chances of revolution, and revolution in general is bad for national governments because it causes lots of death, loss of power, and
TOC, sorry, pause time. Could you really quickly summarize your last point there really quickly on how this is going to cause, how this is better for a government?
yeah, yeah, should I just like, okay, I'll go over my last,
Oh,
subpoint.
sorry.
No worries. Yeah, yeah. Okay, my time will start now. Okay, so essentially what we're saying is that obviously if governments want power, they don't want someone who its citizens are inspiring to fight back because they want to keep that power. So we say that by memorializing Pablo Escobar, that is there is a chance that that would happen, and obviously national governments don't like that. And we say that also revolution is just generally bad for society because it causes lots of death, lots of poverty, and most of the time it leaves, even after the revolution, it leaves the country in ruins. And even if revolution does start as a good cause, it never really ends well, and there is still always poverty and death because of it. And so for these reasons, we say that this house does regret the memorialization of Pablo Escobar in popular culture. Thank you.
Okay. Quick off-time roadmap. So sorry, I'm going to be going through some top of case definitions and observations for this round. One dispute on one definition, then I'm going to be going through op case, then some rebuttals for gov case. If there are no objections, my time will begin on my first word. Hello, judge and opponents. My name is George Bath, and I could not be prouder to affirm the motion. This house regrets, or sorry, negate the motion. This house regrets the memorialization of Pablo Escobar in popular culture. All right. First of all, they give you a few definitions. We agree with the definition of memorialization, and we do agree that it carries a positive connotation. Again, it defines it as commemorating, which implies honoring. All right, this is our one issue with their definitions. They define the House as a national government. We think that this is inherently bad. We think that we should actually be defining the House as a rational actor within this case, as rational actors are usually the people absorbing popular culture. And again, we think that this idea of like a national government is going to be much more subjective when we're viewing this, because when we're talking about drug trade, obviously like a rational actor versus a national government are going to be very different kinds of like viewpoints. So we think that a rational actor would be a much more objective kind of point of view, and they are actually the primary consumers of popular culture. And they are the ones who are choosing to memorialize or not memorialize this individual, Pablo Escobar. So we think that national governments are really irrelevant and aren't the best objective viewer for this round. Now moving on, I will be going through main op case, or sorry, and then we have two observations for this round. First observation, you can encourage change and scrutinize aspects of a person while honoring their good deeds. No one person is static. Just because someone did something bad, it does not mean that they're completely evil, and it does not mean that none of their good accomplishments can be respected or honored. Second observation, this house regrets motion, meaning we are talking about something that already happened, that if something already happened is bad. This is not about potential impacts, right? Because Pablo Escobar already has been memorialized in popular culture, so we are talking about what has already happened, not potential kind of effects of memorializing him. So we're going to be talking about what we see in the status quo and if it is good or bad. Now moving on to main op case. Contention 1, tagline, can't erase the past. Subpoint A, criticizing while honoring. So for this contention, basically what we're saying is that one person is not static. Pablo Escobar, we do concede, had his faults, right? He did have, one of the main ways that he made his money was through the drug trade, which we do concede is often not the best way to make money, right? Crime is usually not good. But again, what we are saying here, we will detail his positive impact on Colombia as a nation and the world in a few minutes. But first of all, we would just like to clarify that just because someone has done bad things and someone has done good things, that doesn't mean that they're a villain, right? That bad thing doesn't cancel out the good thing. We think that we should be able to honor someone, memorialize their good deeds while scrutinizing the bad things that they did to get there. So basically what we're saying here is that we should not let the government simply villainize this man and completely ignore any positive impacts, because he is not a static person. None of us are. I've done many bad things in my life. It does not mean that I'm a horrible person and I do not deserve to be memorialized, right? Maybe I've told a lie, maybe I've said something rude, and obviously the thing that he did is on a much more massive scale. But I'm just trying to give you this idea of principle that one person cannot be defined by one action. You have to look at a multitude of things when deciding if someone deserves to be memorialized or if they are a good or bad person. All right, now moving on to contention 2, tagline, Salvation for Colombia. Subpoint A, welfare and justice. Pablo Escobar was no static villain and actually made a lot of good change within Colombia. This is a quote that we found during our research. He built housing complexes, schools, hospitals, parks, and churches in the city's poorest neighborhoods. He also sponsored children's football teams and built football fields and multi-sports courts. So they kind of tell you that he's a horrible person and that he only inflicted harm, but this is simply not true and is ill-informed. He actually sponsored many welfare programs. He helped children, and he's especially work towards welfare programs in low-income communities by providing more opportunities. Again, judge side opposition would have you believe that he was simply a villain who caused mass suffering, but he was not. They kind of convince you that he made a lot of money off of crime. Well, this is true. He dedicated millions of the dollars he made yearly to welfare programs. Again, he created a better world in Colombia. While he had some negative impacts on the United States, the positive impacts he had by rebuilding Colombia severely outweigh. Before him, Colombia was severely suffering and there was mass poverty, which he helped aid. Again, there were many issues, including mass poverty and malevolent government, and he internally sparked positive change. Again, we simply can't ignore this when considering if memorializing him or not, because when you're thinking about memorializing someone, you have to look at all aspects of their life. You have to look at the virtue of their actions, and he had many virtuous actions, and he contributed positively to Colombian society, which was intensely struggling. Subpoint B, Colombian Liberal Party. Pablo Escobar was also a known constituent and member of the Colombian Liberal Party. The Colombian Liberal Party is built on the foundation of benevolence, democracy, consent of the governed, internationalism, secularism, and much more. While being a flawed man, he utilized the power he had and the influence he had, including his social capital and force, to make good change for the people of Colombia. He aligned himself with democracy and progressiveness, and he strived for good change. He eventually became part of Congress and continued to implement this good change that cannot be ignored. Again, what we are mainly saying here is that people are not static, right? We are trying to convince you that while they give you the surface level argument and just think that you will just assume that he's a horrible person without actually examining the good things that he did in his life, we can clearly see that this man does have aspects of his life and actions that deserve to be memorialized. Contention 2, tagline National Pride for Colombia. This will be brief. Subpoint A, tagline setting a precedent for a benevolent internal government. Again, we would just like to remind you that he funded a better society that lasted for a long time frame in Colombia and overall caused massive net benefit. And he created national pride by giving them a hero to follow. He may not have been a hero here, but he was a hero in many other places, and he sparked national pride and he sparked massive benefit. So this is a contention kind of talking about we should memorialize a man who did a good person. If this man had, if we had we do have mass poverty within the United States, but if someone had implemented welfare programs, built churches, kind of implemented massive positive change within our country, we would be memorializing because they have helped us. Again, us as the United States, we have done many bad things to other nations. That doesn't mean that we believe that we are all horrible people and we are all necessarily constituents of this horrible, malevolent nation. Again, we are just saying that this is not static. And again, this will cause national pride for Colombia because he massively helped the people and constituents of the Colombian government. And overall, you will cause massive pride, you will cause hope, and you will overall cause a better nation that is more strengthened at its core. Now, moving on to some rebuttals for Gov case. Their first tagline, contention 1 glorifies criminals. So the side government ceases to understand why he's being glorified. They don't provide you with any context. They kind of try to convince you that they're glorifying him because he is a criminal. People are not glorifying him because he is a criminal. They're glorifying things a criminal did. These are very different things. Again, they try to tell you that this is telling people to commit crime and telling people that being a bad person is okay. No, we're telling you that this man did good things and was also a criminal. These are completely different things. They cease to examine any context or give you any analysis on what this actually means. And then they say that there will be less empathy towards victims if we memorialize a criminal, but we don't see any equivalency here or any linking of why this is true. Just because we think that this man did good things, that doesn't mean we're going to be oh, the victims don't matter. They suck. That's not true. Again, yeah, okay, just moving on. We really received no information and linking of why this is true. Contention 2, they say that this glorifies drugs, pretty similar, no linking, no real actual link to why this is true. We say that again, this provides a complete lack of context. We are not at all saying we want to memorialize drugs or that we are saying that drugs are a good thing. We are memorializing a good action done by a man. These are two completely different things. We are memorializing this man's good deeds. We're not memorializing this man's crimes and the things that he promoted. We don't think that that's an equivalency, and we don't think that that's a fair equivalency for this round, 30-second grace period. And finally, they say national government wants to maintain power. So basically, they're saying that censorship is okay here. They're saying that having someone that has made good change or was radical shouldn't be memorialized just because he had some crime. Again, this is encouraging censorship. This man did good things, and this is a biased perspective. Again, we think that like saying that silencing like anyone who has any flaws in the society or could cause any questioning of governance is undemocratic and is net negative. So for all of these reasons and more, could not be prouder to negate the resolution. Thank you.
Okay, hello, judges. My name is Shiloh Wall. I am the second government speaker for the Berkeley team, and my time will start now. Okay, firstly, to go over a little bit of topic case. The opposition side refuted our this House definition, which was a national government, by saying that this definition is inherently bad and that it should be a rational individual because these are the people observing it. But what the opposition seems to miss is that this is also the people who are creating it. The most biased person we could make this house is a rational individual because they are the ones creating this content. Of course, they want to create the things that we memorialize Pablo Escobar in. Of course, if a person made a video game that memorialized Pablo Escobar, they'd want it to do well. The most biased person we can make this house is a rational actor. And also, they say that it mainly affected the people and rational individuals, but you know who it also majorly affected? These governments. It had a huge impact on these governments as well. So we completely stand by our this house definition. They had an observation, which was just because someone did bad things doesn't mean it cancels out the good that they did. And our team completely agrees with that. We're not saying that like we're not saying that Pablo Escobar didn't do good things. We're saying that the memorialization of him like glorifies the bad things he did as well. It makes the impact, the incredibly negative impacts he had on society, like get glorified and almost disappear. The negative impacts he had on our society, which is what the weighing mechanism is far, far greater than the positive impacts he had on it. He had an incredible net negative just by himself. He killed so many people, he harmed so many people, he ruined so many people's lives. Um, Uh, okay. To start off on the government case, in response to our first contention, which was glorifying criminals, they said that people are not glorifying him because he was a criminal, but they're glorifying him for the good things that he did. Um, I've I've kind of already gone over this, but again, when we highlight the good things he did so much, it takes away the impacts of the bad things he did, and it paints him in such a good light that it like disregards the incredible negative impacts he had on our society, and these impacts completely outweigh the good that he had. Also, something also, they make this point about how we're arguing about the status.
Still are.
All of our, not right now, sorry, but all of our points still stand because something that has already happened can still have impacts in the future. Everything we're arguing about can still impact the future. In response to our second subpoint, they say that there's less empathy towards victims. Sorry, and that there's no link. Um, they say that there is no link and that our point isn't true. But what do you, but no, we say that yes, this point is true, and we're talking more. If you're talking about the good things he did, this isn't true. But we're obviously talking about the bad things because the negative impacts he had on our society are incredibly outweigh. I can't repeat this point out enough. The negative impacts he had on our society incredibly outweigh the good impacts he had. Also, as I explained, this house is a national government. It's not just the US, so it's any society, not only the US society. He did not just impact the Colombian and US societies, he impacted far more places, especially in Latin America. Like a bunch of national governments were impacted about him. We can't only talk about the US and Colombia. They didn't really respond to any of sorry, to hop over to the opposition case, um, their first contention was that we can't erase the past, basically, and that we're criticizing while honoring, and this is not, he wasn't a static criminal, and a person hasn't only done bad things. And again, I've gone over this. We're not saying he didn't do good things. We're saying the bad things he did outweigh the good things that he did, and he has done more harm on societies than he's done than good. Their second contention was salvation for Colombia, and they said he made a lot of good change. He built hospitals, schools, churches. But you know what has a bigger impact than building hospitals, schools, churches, or like housing? The people he killed. What has a bigger impact is the people that are literally dead because of him. That has a greater impact than like someone having a home or people literally being dead. Um, their second subpoint was that he made a lot of money off of crime, but he implemented good change in Congress. But he also ruined the Colombian reputation, which is bad for that national government. Like people associate bad things with Colombia because of the incredible, like because of their drug cartel system that he was like a major part of. And even if it helped Colombia a small bit, he also did so many terrible things in Colombia and throughout the rest of the world and in a bunch of other national governments. Yeah, their third subpoint is that the positive impacts on Colombia outweigh the impact on the US. But again, we're not only talking about Colombia in the US, we're talking about a bunch of other national governments. He did not only like do bad things in Colombia and the US, he did stuff everywhere. And also, Colombia is still heavily struggling, so all the good things he did had no impact, but obviously the good things he did had a less of an impact as the negative things that he did. Okay, sorry, now to just quickly go back to the government case. I'm sorry for being confusing. On our third contention, they responded to our point about revolutions being bad for a society and how a national government wouldn't want revolution by saying censorship is bad for a society and undemocratic. But considering this house is a national government, of course, a national government would not want to lose its power. It would not want to be put in a place where it's losing power. Also, revolution is incredibly violent. There are better ways to improve society than providing a space for revolution, which is in this situation glorifying criminals and glorifying drugs, glorifying murders. Saying that he did good things, while it's true, like doesn't take away from the fact that he did so much harm on basically so many places in the world, and to so many societies, and to so many national governments. Thank you, Judge. I can see the rest of my time. That is why we strongly affirm the motion that this House does regret the memorialization of Pablo Escobar in popular culture. Thank you.
Okay, so quickly, I'm gonna do an off-time roadmap. Firstly, I'm gonna make a quick top of case note and refutation towards what this house is, and then I'm gonna be going to opposition case, and then after that, I'm gonna be going into government's case. And if there's no objections from my judges or opponents, my time begins on my first word. Okay, so top of case, quickly, we kind of are starting to go back between this, this house definition, and they're kind of just saying that it's completely like biased take to, put this as like a rational actor, or like a consumer of this media. It's just completely biased. But the thing is, the national government has absolutely no involvement in this popular culture. You don't see the national government posting brat memes on a daily basis, for example. No, you see regular individuals such as me and yourself, like for example, I don't know, like teenagers, even adults. You don't see the national government up here posting memes of cringy things, or kind of like creating this like think basis of popular culture. You've never seen that. So to say that they have this kind of creation and involvement in popular culture is completely wrong, and it's not historically accurate at all, and they have no involvement. So this kind of like saying that it's going to be biased is not right at all. And the thing is, the most accurate portrayal of this house would actually be the consumers of this popular media, who are consuming, who are being affected by this popular media, by this popular culture, kind of like glorification, you could even say, of Pablo Escobar. Who's being the most directly affected? What exactly does the U.S. federal government actually have to do with this? The only involvement they actually talk about of the U.S. federal government, sorry, not the U.S. federal government, but of kind of like this national government is in their last contention C3 of kind of like, oh, government doesn't like, people to resist and revolt, which is, I'll get to that in a minute, but it doesn't even really have an involvement with the, kind of contention itself. Who is the direct consumers of popular culture and media? That would be me, for example. That would be you, for example. Rational individuals, rational actors, teenagers, kids, adults, not government officials. You don't see people constantly doing things like that. We are the ones who are consumers. We are the one who created this popular culture. We are the ones who are actually glorifying Pablo Escobar. Again, you don't see the national government saying, hey, Pablo Escobar is so beautiful, I love him. No, it's us. It's individuals like me, individuals like you. So where exactly does the national government come into? We still have no real idea, and this kind of like point on how they're so involved is completely not true, and at most is kind of like a wash, honestly. Now moving into opposition case. So for observation, they kind of talk about our first observation. They say, we agree, we are not saying that Pablo Escobar didn't do good things, but we're saying that this normalization of him glorifies the bad things as well. But the thing is, no one sits around and says that drug trade is good. They say he made like net negative, but we're talking about his glorification specifically, not his actions. That's kind of what the motion implies. Okay, so now going to see one of opposition case, can't erase the past. I gotta talk about how, when we highlight the good things, it's just leads to glorification. But the thing is, we're not attempting to glorify his actions, but rather the good he did. As the motion states, we cannot erase the past. Not as this contention states, we cannot simply erase the past, and simply not acknowledging the impact he had is ridiculous. And I kind of want to make this apparent, but by kind of the opposite of memorialization to means to not honor, to not remember, and not remember his actions and the impact he had on people is detrimental. And I will get into this. As stated before by my partner, the U.S. has done many things which were horrible, and you don't see us not holding tribute to the U.S. on a daily basis. Many people in the U.S. are patriotic, but that doesn't mean that the U.S. is high esteemed government. No, the U.S. has done many crazy things, actually. For example, instituting Jim Crow laws, holding minorities, just in oppression constantly, this U.S. government. But again, you don't see us simply saying, oh, let's simply trash the government. No, you see glorification. You're going to see glorification on any basis, on anything that happens in any atrocity. I mean, for example, I think we can all agree Nazis are horrible, but there's still going to be people who glorify them. So this kind of take on saying, oh, well, glorification shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen, especially with these horrible actions, but it's kind of going to be prone to, and it's going to happen in either world on any subject you have. So this isn't directly inherent on Pablo Escobar and how we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it. But again, we're not trying to glorify his actions per se, but still his good he did. The good he did. Also, let's zoom in on this national government involvement, since they kind of place great emphasis. Mind you, Pablo Escobar wasn't elected to Congress, a huge achievement on the this national government, the Colombian Congress, for example. But the thing is, how did he get into office in the first place? How did he escape from jail in 1992? How was he on the run for 7 long years? The thing is, by acknowledging the Pablo Escobar and the impact he had, we also have to hold the national government, in this case, accountable. We have to say, hey, how did you guys constantly let this guy constantly escape, constantly go on the run, and get elected into Colombian Congress? So even if we are on this point of, national government, it also becomes a question of, well, how exactly did you have this involvement in Pablo Escobar? How did it get to this point of glorification in which he was able to constantly be on the run for so long? And that's because of the national government. That's because he was in Congress, for example. He was elected into Colombian Congress, for example. And if you don't believe me, you can search it up. But how was he able to get away with so many things? And that's because of the national government. Again, if you see things, for example, like slavery, we have to hold the government accountable for simply letting this slide. And that's kind of what it is. And by forgetting this, we're forgetting the fact that the national government had it kind of involvement in this. And again, because again, the opposite of memorialization is saying that essentially that we regret this. We don't want to memorize him. And again, by doing so, we're also forgetting or not, paying attention to the national government and the involvement they had in this. And we cannot simply do that, because that is not fair, seeing as we have done that for every single atrocity I've done. We have involved the national government somehow, because they have always participated. And not to do that to Pablo Escobar is simply unfair. It does not promote education or awareness on any scale. And if anything, it's just very, net negative to education and awareness in the world. Okay. Now moving on to C2, which is salvation for Colombia. They kind of talk about the people he killed had a greater impact, and they kind of talk about he ruined Colombia's reputation. But the thing is, trade didn't cease with Colombia, and there's really no pragmatic impact, just an idea. And it wasn't a small bit of help he had created, welfare. He had created welfare in a poverty-ridden city. They kind of try to minimize his impact. And the thing is, the people he killed did have a huge impact. We're not trying to negate that. But the thing is, by choosing not to memorialize him, we which means we don't hold these people he killed in remembrance, because that's literally the opposite of memorization, meaning that we're not holding them in honor. You can't hold, the people he killed in memorialization and then not talk about him, because it's like, well, how did they get there? How did they end up dead in the first place? Again, we're holding people, these people he killed, these people he had an impact on in memorialization as well, because of what Pablo Escobar did. But we're also paying attention to the good he did as well. You cannot oh my God, I'm sorry, I hate this word. You cannot memorialize, the people he killed, the impact he had on society, and then choose to not memorialize him as well, because he is the cause of those impacts. It's simply ridiculous to say. It's like talking about the effect and not talking about the cause. You can't do that. It doesn't work, and it's just simply ridiculous to state. And again, like I say, he didn't ruin Colombia's reputation at all. People are aware of it. Like, they kind of know, like, Colombia is associated with him, of course, but you don't see like people fearing for their lives. No, you still see people traveling out to Colombia. They're not constantly like shaking in their boots in Colombia. Like, you don't see that. So there's kind of like mischaracterization. C3 for National Pride for Colombia. It may not just be about Colombia and the US, but the memorialization will really only matter in Colombia, where he was a hero, won't negatively impact any other nations. Okay, now getting into government's case. So C1, they kind of talk about how, like, oh, his negative impact still outweighs. And they say the negative impacts he had don't matter. We aren't weighing what he did versus the good. We were talking about if he deserves memorization for his good actions. We kind of go back and forth together. Again, it doesn't matter the traumatic harm he did. We were talking about his memorization, not him specifically. This is a regret motion of the glorification specifically. C2, there's also really no link in the refutation. By memorializate is implied that people only honor the good things, not taking drugs, and it doesn't really make sense. And yeah, also C1 really quickly, because they talk about like video games, but then there's tons of video games that promote drugs and harm, and they don't promote in the most like accurate light. Like, they don't say like, hey, this will cause great harm if you do it in real life. There's many games like that. Also, they don't provide you the game for which this is in. For example, he was in Narcos, which accurately promotes this. How he was a drug lord and has involvement in it, but that's not the only real game he was kind of in. So I don't really know where they got this information from, and I would love it if they gave us the name of this game. So now quickly moving to C3. Again, they talk about revolution as violent and bad. The thing is, this house, even as a national government, is extremely biased. Even if this government doesn't support this, that doesn't mean it's not right. Imagine if the government went out and said constantly, hey, don't revolutionize. I would probably not have rights. Many other minorities would not have rights. You can't simply say that. That is extremely biased and extremely abusive. So for that reason and more, I urge you judges to cast a ballot for opposition. Thank you.
All right, my time will start on my first word. Side government gives you multiple mischaracterizations for this round. They want you to believe that this memorialization, wait, sorry, one second. Pause time really quickly.
Georgia, could you mute?
Sorry. I just don't want an echo. Okay, sorry. Resume time. I was at 10 seconds. They want you to believe that this memorialization is wrong because he was a bad person that is glorifying bad actions. Judge, rationally, this memorialization is not going to be of bad actions. I cannot emphasize this enough. Realistically, in Op World, no one has memorialized the drug trade. Again, Op World is the status quo. We don't see memorialization of the drug trade. We don't see pushing people to be criminals because we are memorializing Pablo Escobar. This is not rational. Again, this motion is a this House regrets motion, so the impacts have already happened. We have talked about this in our constructive and rebuttal speeches. Also, again, we aren't sitting here saying, yeah, drugs are great, crime is great. No, we are sitting here saying building schools is great, funding kind of like welfare programs, like funding kids like football teams is great. We are not sitting here saying that we should memorialize his crimes. It is about the good he did. And side government completely fails to prove that his glorification has caused any crime or any extra drug use, which is their main impacts for this round. And they simply fall at the basis of rationality. Though again, as it is unrefuted, his glorification has caused pride and unity in Colombia. Again, we only see good impacts and they mischaracterize this debate. Again, I just want to emphasize this before going into main clashes because I cannot emphasize this enough. They want you to think that because we are glorifying building these schools, because we are glorifying building these churches, funding welfare programs, that more drug trade, like more violence and more crime is going to happen. That is simply not true. That is their main impacts and they aren't rational. They don't make sense. And obviously, memorialization is about memorializing good actions, not the bad actions. Again, they're saying that like that's a full package, but no, when people are talking about this man, when they're commemorating him, they're not sitting there saying, oh yeah, it was so great. He was in the drug trade. No, that is just a mischaracterization of this argument. And again, they don't really provide you any rational impacts in the status quo of how he has caused any turmoil or chaos or revolution. Now, moving on to main clashes. First main clash, will this cause revolutions? They kind of tell you this, but no, this will not cause revolutions. First of all, this is a this House regrets motion. We are talking about regretting what has actually already happened after his memorialization, and his glorification has not caused any revolutions or internal decay internationally. And again, there's no link for this point, so it doesn't really stand, and you can't really flow through this impact. And again, Colombian people painting murals of or celebrating a man who has dedicated millions of dollars to hindering poverty will not cause international revolutions. We don't see how this characterization is fair or really applies to this argument in any way. They would like you to think that just because he is had his bad aspects, that will like instantly cause all of this turmoil, all of this hatred, all of this crime, all of this drug trade. No, this is solely inspiring pride in Colombia, and we don't really see these international impacts, including revolution, including more crime, and including more drug trade. Overall, we only see the positive impact of causing national unity and pride in Colombia. We don't really see how any of their impacts make sense for this round, as it is this House regrets motion, implying that these things have already happened and they don't warrant out how any of these impacts have happened in the status quo. And they give you a well-principled argument, but they give you a pragmatic framework in the first place. Now, moving on. Our second clash, can we honor bad people for good things? Yes, we are not honoring his bad actions. We are honoring his dedication to hope and education for the new generation. No one just memorializes drug trade. This is irrational. Now, under weighing under net benefit, judges none of their impacts stand. Why is this? They are irrational. People are not glorifying him as a criminal. They are glorifying him as a savior to Colombia. We understand that he did bad things, but we are really only realistically seeing pride in Colombia. By glorifying his good actions for Colombia, we're not going to see excess violence or drug trade in the United States, and they don't prove that this is true either. No other nations are going to be hurt. We are only going to see positive impacts, 30-second grace. This is not about encouraging drugs or crime. This is about respecting and encouraging pride and welfare programs within Colombia and setting a precedent for what is good to do, and glorifying a man's good actions, and simply not inspiring new crime or drug trade. For all of these reasons and more, could not be prouder to negate the motion. Thank you. And urge you to cast an opposition ballot. Thank you.
Okay. Cool. I have 5 minutes and my time will start now. Okay. So first, I'm going to go into some like general observations, and then I'll go into refutations within my voter issues, which is like what we're deciding this round on. Okay, so first, obviously, we both agree on the idea of memorialization, that, you know, it's a positive thing and that you don't really like remembering history is different than memorializing and glorifying. We say that this is a crucial part of the motion. We're not saying that obviously we should like forget about Pablo Escobar. Obviously, he had a huge impact on our world, whether that be good or bad. We're simply saying that we should not be painting Pablo Escobar in a good light by memorializing and glorifying him. We think that this is incredibly important. We're not saying we should just erase history. We're saying it should not be painted in a good light. Okay, so now on to the debate about what we're defining this house as. We say that we should still be defining this house as a national government. They say that that the national government had absolutely no involvement in popular culture, and to say that they have creation in popular culture is untrue. We agree with this. They say that individuals are the ones glorifying Pablo Escobar in popular culture because they're the ones creating popular culture, obviously. We say that this is true. We say that this actually is in support of this house being a national government, because if people are the ones glorifying Pablo Escobar, of course they're going to be biased in whether or not they regret it. We say that because national governments are not as involved in popular culture, that this is a much more unbiased definition for this house. We say that a rational individual is obviously going to be biased in this. Okay, so now on to, or actually, okay, first of all, one major point that they keep bringing up is that they're not memorializing Pablo Escobar's bad actions and the things he did that were bad. They're simply memorializing like his good things, that it's not a full package. We say that memorializing is a full package. You cannot memorialize someone in a good light without undermining the bad things that they did. And in this case, we say that Pablo Escobar's negative actions had a lot more of an impact on society than his good things. So by memorializing Pablo Escobar, it is a full package. And by doing that, you are minimizing his negative impacts, which again, were bigger than his positive impacts. Okay, now on to our voter issues. First, we're going to say just impact on society in general, but we're also saying impact on Colombia specifically, and then we'll go on to impact on the world as a whole. So when we're talking about Colombia, one of their main points is that like national pride and that, you know, he helped build schools and churches and hospitals, etc. in Colombia. We say that this might be true, but by memorializing Pablo Escobar, you're also minimizing the negative things that he did in Colombia. He was killing people in Colombia. He was increasing drug trade in Colombia. Just because he was building schools in certain communities in Colombia does not mean that he had a net good on Colombia. We say that he actually had a net harm on Colombia. Also, specifically because he has sort of associated drug trade and the things he did with Colombia, we say this is significant damage to Colombia's reputation, as my partner said, and that this absolutely has a net harm on Colombia as a whole. They say that Colombia is not doing as terribly, that we have no linking on this. We say that Colombia is still struggling as a country, that to say that Colombia like is not struggling anymore is simply untrue. Like look at right now. They say that like you can't hold it when it comes to impacts in Colombia and victims of his crimes, that you can memorialize, you can't memorialize the victims without memorializing him. We say that this is untrue. We see in history, you memorialize Vietnam War victims, or you memorialize, you know, Holocaust victims, but you're not memorializing the people who did those things. You can absolutely memorialize a victim without memorializing the perpetrator. Again, remembering history is incredibly different from memorializing and glorifying. Finally, when we're talking about impacts here, we absolutely can talk about impacts on the future because history does have impact on the future. We say that their point on this is absolutely void. So overall, we say that the impacts on Colombia are net harm. And so for this reason, we say that we win this voter issue. They also, finally, they say that we have to hold the national government accountable. National government has involvement in this, and yet they say that national government has no involvement in this. We say that this is contradictory. Okay, finally, on to impact in the world. We say that one, even if he was helping people in Colombia, he was also hurting people all throughout the world. He only did a small net good in Colombia. Compared to the rest of the world, he was increasing drug trade and like killing people and kidnapping people. We say that when we're talking about the world as a whole, which is net benefits to society, meaning like in the world, that he does have a net harm, and that therefore we should not be memorializing him and diminishing his good actions, because again, memorializing implies that you're focusing mostly on his good actions rather than him as a whole. And we say that this is not good because obviously he had a net harm on society, and that therefore we should not be memorializing him. However, we should be remembering him in history, just not in a good way. Thank you.
Uni, you can start.
All right, thanks. I can go.
Or you
So
can
I
go
c-
then.
Yeah, so I can start off with sharing the result first. So it's a 3-0 decision in favor of government or gov team. And I can just kind of summarize my points very quickly, and then I will hand it off to whoever wants to go next. David, maybe. So, okay, so I voted for gov mainly based on the framework of the debate about the net benefits. And I'll just kind of summarize the contentions that, so 3 main contentions from the gov side were the glorification of criminals in terms of the positive actions and negative actions, where crime versus other societal activities which opposition brought out in terms of building the churches and schools and parks and so on and so forth. So in terms of net benefits, if we view, and the government pointed out repeatedly in their speeches that that benefit was localized to Colombia, and the drug trade was across multiple nations, US, Colombia, and other South American nations. And also as part of his criminal activities, he killed a lot of people. So without having any specific numbers, it generally seems like if you are doing something bad for multiple countries across different geographies, that seems to be affecting more people negatively than positively, even if there were good things happening in the local communities across the Colombian nation. So on net benefits round, I think I kind of vote for that contention. The next contention about the drugs should not be encouraged. If you memorialize and you are kind of promoting the drugs and criminal activities, I kind of find it neutral because just by memorializing something, yes, it does have that context that the person was involved in the criminal activities, but it does not necessarily imply that it encourages the bad things the person did. It doesn't directly lead to the conclusion that by saying putting the person, the popular culture as part of your cultural things, that you are saying that doing drug activities or criminal activities is good. That I kind of did not follow that logical conclusion. So for me, that point was neutral. I don't really think that either government or opposition was able to convince me either way. The third point from the contention from the government was the governments want power and they want to, it will be helpful not to memorialize them so to prevent revolutions. I kind of go with the opposition side on this because memorializing a one person for, in again, popular culture does not necessarily logically lead me to believe that it will lead to revolutions. There are a lot more factors which government side could have brought out clearly that how does it lead to revolution. Mostly it was just about the statement that he was popular and he was doing good things, so government could have led to revolution. And also the other factor which opposition brought out is that he was actually part of the government at some point. How did he get there is another story, or you can say we didn't kind of deeply cover into this debate, but he was part of the government. That kind of negates the revolution argument that if he became part of the government, then how is he going to have the revolution against it? So that point sort of favors the opposition side. So that's the kind of general contention summary. But overall, on the benefits of the net benefits criteria, I'm voting for Gov. So that's my summary. I'll hand it off to David.
Okay, I agree with Ayako, is that how you pronounce your name? When you're dealing with net benefits, obviously it's it's the mathematical formula, what's best minus what's worse is equal what's best or what's net good or whatever. So I thought the government, the first speaker, which was, I think, Jane Kelly, are you the first speaker, right? I think when she said what's best for the society and to encourage behavior and it's skewed, this skewed behavior, I thought was really, really powerful in that it really showed a really good, it showed why it's a negative to have memorialization of Pablo Escobar. I thought the George's argument about not everyone is static, not everyone's life is static, and we shouldn't be, I'm paraphrasing here, but shouldn't be judged on our worst behavior or worst attributes. But when somebody's attributes are so bad, then it's such a huge mountain or obstacle to overcome. So I thought in a net benefits argument, that was just too much of a negative to overcome because there wasn't enough positives to overcome that large negative. So essentially that's why I thought that the Gov won on the net benefits side, and congratulations. Go ahead. Go ahead, Muni.
Oh, sorry, I think I first spoke. Maybe it's Yako's turn.
Who spoke first?
I spoke first. I'm Muni. Right.
Okay.
I think I voted. Yeah, it was a very good debate, and I really liked how you helped the judges keep track of the points, and that was very helpful in either side. But I made a decision to vote for the government because the strongest point I think was when the government brought in my view to to look at the perspective of not just the U.S. and Colombia, but to the other parts of the world, and also to look at the negative impact he made to Colombia, not just to look at the positive. And that was one of the strong points to me. Thank you. It was a very good debate. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
for
much,
judging.
everyone.
Thank you for
Congratulations
judging the round.
and good luck on your next rounds. Have a good day.